So good morning, everybody, and thank you for joining our Accountant Online Business Growth series of webinars. My name is Rose Kervick, and I'm a director in Accountant Online. And I'm joined today by Frederica Shepherd. Frederica is Joint Managing Director of HR Consultancy Voltage, the HR consultancy based in Dublin. And Frederica is a chartered member of CIPD and an IMCA certified management consultant. And Frederica is working as a HR consultant and advisor with Voltage. So today, Frederica is going to share with us tips for employers managing remote workers. So anybody joining us live this morning, please do put your questions in the chat and we'll ask Frederica throughout the presentation or at the end, if we have time as well at the end. So Frederica, thank you so much for joining us. And this is a very topical at the moment, and you're very well equipped to give us advice because you work with companies of all sizes really, and you've become very familiar with these struggles and challenges that companies and employees are facing. So tell us how we should face these challenges and let us know your tips.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Rose, for the introduction, and good morning, everybody, wherever you are. Delighted to be here this morning to chat to you about this subject. And yes, as you say, look, I think this is so topical for all of us. And in some ways, we probably think we could write the book because we've just come through the most bizarre of times and we're still in it. So I guess what I want to do this morning is to just work through some of the principles associated with remote working, because really the place we've been in for the last 14 months or so has not been your classic remote working model. We have been working in the most unsuitable of circumstances in most cases, and we've been juggling all sorts of different responsibilities. So it wouldn't be your classic remote working model that we would like to use. So I think all of you, if we were to go around and ask for everybody for their views on what their experience has been, I think we would probably share a lot of the same scars. So today I'm going to work through some tips and would really love to make this as relevant and as meaning as possible for all of you. So if you can send through any of your questions, and hopefully we'll get some time at the end to go through that. So what I'm going to talk to you about is very much, I suppose, what really is remote working. It has become a vocabulary that we're very familiar with, but what does it really mean? Cover a little bit around the employer responsibilities, because I think that's an area that we've all been kind of working our way through. Understand the importance of building a good remote working culture, because it is here to stay. So we need to make sure that we get it to work for us. And then while we're developing out our policies and what remote working is going to be in your organization, really important to keep sight of the area of equality, diversity and inclusion, because they are at risk in all of the changes that are happening right now. So there's been huge progress in creating workplaces that champion diversity and inclusion, that have good fundamental equality and dignity in the workplace. But now that we have shifted so much, we need to make sure we don't take our eye off the ball there, and that all the decisions we make from a good basis. So I'd like to cover a little bit on that, and also just look at some of the challenges and opportunities that remote working brings, because you're aware of some of them. I hope you're enjoying some of the benefits that can be achieved from them. But there are challenges with any shift of a working model. There's going to be naturally some challenges. And then I also want to look at the whole area of new regulations that you're all very familiar with, I'd say at this stage: the right to disconnect and the right to request remote working, and just the importance then of putting a remote working strategy in place that's fit for your business. So we're going to talk about lots of different things, but at the end of the day, you're going to need to try and develop a strategy that works for you, because all of you come from different types of organizations And what works in one organization may not work somewhere else. So there's a number of things that you need to take into account, and we'll talk about them. So on to, I guess, remote working and what is it? Well, you know, we've been through quite a journey here, and I'm sure, as I said earlier, we could all share some war stories of the last few months. And it has been very variable. It has been very up and down. I'm sure, like me, you feel there are days that it's working really well and you're getting through wonderful workload. The team seem to be getting on fine. There's good rapport and relationship. And then other days you think, oh my gosh, I can't wait for us all to be back in the office and have an opportunity to sit and have a coffee together, or even just troubleshoot, problem solve with people in real time. So it has been very variable. And as I say, what we've been through has really been crisis management as opposed to your classic remote working model. So let's not use what we have had for the last 14 months or so as the model we're going to use going forward. Let's take from it what we can. Let's identify our learnings, look at what worked, and shape it into something that is better. The change is ongoing, and we know that. So where we work, when we work, and how we work is all up for discussion, all up for review. And it's not just employers driving that agenda. That is an agenda that's driven by staff as well. It's driven by government. And there's a European directive coming later this year that actually is around flexible working. So, you know, it is something we're going to have to really face and make sure we develop something that's right for us. So it's not something we can avoid. And I think for any of you looking at this area right now, it's good to start planning, good to start the dialogue going, good to start doing your research, your analysis, gather all the data that you need so that you can actually start to shape it. Okay. I wanted to share just some details on a research that was carried out recently, and interesting. They were looking at the whole area of, you know, April 2020 and the change up to October 2020 in the whole topic of remote working. And as you can see, across all aspects,
gosh, it's very high, isn't it?
It really is more.
Oh, that's quite a shocker for me. 94% want to work remotely some or all of the time post-crisis.
Yeah.
Wow.
So interestingly, how it has increased, you know, so in some ways I would have thought it would have nearly shifted the other way.
Yeah, people might be tired of it. Yeah.
Absolutely. And, you know, people have been working in environments that haven't been suitable, and it's been difficult. And so in lots of ways, you would think that people just can't wait to get back to the office environment and just, I'm done with this remote working. But what this research is saying is that a higher percentage of people want remote working as part of their working model. So it is going to continue, and we need to make sure we have a model that's going to work, you know.
Gosh, so that's a huge amount. And is that research in UK and Ireland, Frederica?
It's Ireland. This is Irish.
It's Ireland.
Yeah,
okay.
So it was carried out by the Whitaker Institute and NUIG. So very relevant to the Irish situation. And it's published on the internet for anybody who'd like to have more details on it, because it also gives some advice to government on what the protocols might be going forward.
Okay. Nevertheless, I suppose we'd have to research our own staff in case there was any anomalies there with the staff that we have necessarily.
Completely.
But,
So this is obviously research that has been carried out across the broad population. But you know, that's why I think for all of the companies joining us today, this is valuable data points for you to reference. But when it comes to designing and developing your own policy,
you have to go back.
This as background, but ask your staff. You know, and I was at a conference earlier this week, and it was interesting. This psychotherapist, Dr. Coleman Noctor, fantastic, interesting guy. So for any of you who's interested in the whole area of psychotherapy and the workplace. He's works as a assistant professor in UCD, and he was talking about, the shift from how we felt when we all knew we had to stay within a radius, that we were all to work remotely unless we were frontline workers or essential workers, to now coming into an environment where we have to choose.
Yes.
And how challenging that is going to be for us. So the sort of things that our mental fitness has been impacted. So resilience, obviously, really important. And the sort of things we were able to juggle before, the sort of challenges we were able to overcome before, it has changed us, because we haven't had the same challenges. We've had different challenges. But now when we bring all of that with us and we have to face into, well, will I go on a Tuesday to the office, or will I go every second week? Where will I sit when I go to the office? Will the people who are sitting on the same floor, will they be vaccinated?
Yes.
So all of these variables now are adding to
the complexity. Yeah.
For sure. And are adding to people's stress and anxiety as well.
Okay.
So I think it's a really challenging time for employers to try and actually support their staff. And shape what this blended working is going to be like for the future. So taking all the lessons from the experiences we've had, but trying to bring it forward to make sure it's viable, sustainable, and that the style of work that's carried out can still be conducted in the way that the staff want as well. So it has to make good business sense, of course. So in relation to some of the influencing factors, obviously, around that. So I think it's important to take those into account. There's a lot of talk about location and property prices, and how property prices around Ireland has changed as a result of this. And the nice output from that is, of course, communities all over the country are going to become more vibrant, not just at holiday time, but actually throughout the year.
Certainly,
So there's lots of really good things, I think, coming out of this whole experience. But equally, there's going to be some of the challenges, and we need to make sure that it is sustainable. And the other side of it, of course, is, and I'm sure some of the audience here this morning will say that, not being able to switch off has become a problem. And the longer we have been without physical contact or face-to-face meetings with our colleagues, maybe the more difficult that relationship that was fluid and worked. And so, it is difficult. And there's been lots of juggling that individuals have had to do with all sorts of different responsibilities. So, it has been quite a journey. We're not there yet, but it is a time for us to reflect, bring some of the learnings with us, and shape what it will be for the future. So what we've learned, I think, is really important, and we need to pay attention to that. We know that remote working can deliver. Trust is probably the biggest barrier. And so when we think about, how will I manage my staff? Well, your staff won't stay with you if there isn't trust. So the more monitoring you do is not going to be what prompts an employee to stay with you. But what could make the difference is if they feel that they're trusted. So I would say trust has become a bigger factor than people may have realized in the past. So think about it for your organization. Think about your practices and your style of engagement. Work, obviously, is something that you do, not somewhere where you go. So we know that now. It's not just a destination. And obviously, there's lots of opportunity that has been shaped, like yourself. Lots of companies that you support and companies that we support have been incredibly successful throughout this process. And I hope lots of companies that are here with us this morning have been able to enjoy some of those opportunities. But equally, it's been challenging. And even embracing the opportunities from a business point of view, managing the dynamic with your staff, with remote onboarding, with virtual hiring, all of that comes with its own overheads and its own difficulties. So we really have been incredible in how we've come through all this. So that demarcation between what is home and what is work, and that blended mix works for some, but I think that we couldn't possibly say that it works for everybody.
No.
So we need to make sure that we get this next phase that we're coming into shape so that it is more sustainable.
Yeah.
And look, our responsibility as employers is very important. And again, when you think about this time last year, we were all settling into remote working. We've been in it for a few months. In lots of cases, businesses weren't even able to supply their employees with laptops. The computer shops ran short.
Yeah.
Manufacturing ran low. So people were using their own devices to work. They were working at their kitchen tables. They were working from their bedrooms.
Yeah.
That is not the classic remote working situation. As I say, it was a crisis management situation.
Okay.
So we need to now reflect on what is our responsibility as an employer for the future, because we need to make sure we're creating a remote working environment and a model that is going to fit with our duties and responsibilities, but also that will support our staff. So the first thing I would say to you is the importance of developing a remote working policy for your business. And define what those remote working policies or options are. And just again, to think about too many options may actually cause more problems.
Okay.
So it could be a bit overwhelming. So I would say keep it simple.
Yeah.
And don't overkill the amount of options that you want to give.
Okay.
Gather the data from your staff. Absolutely. Take on board their feedback and their input. And then start to shape maybe 2 or 3 options around how this might work for your business. In doing so, set out a criteria for assessing. This is where equality, diversity, and inclusion is going to be really, really important. And this is your touch point. So when you're making a decision about what roles or what individuals can work remotely or can work a blended model or need to be in the office all the time, make sure you're making decisions from the right baseline. Okay. And feel that you can actually substantiate that if it was ever questioned or challenged.
Okay.
I would recommend anything like this that you do it on a trial basis so that you have an opportunity to take the learnings, make necessary adjustments. It might work for you, but it mightn't work for the employee, or it might work for the employee and it mightn't work for the business. So take the opportunity to actually put it on a trial and actually take some learnings from it. So set some good guidelines and parameters around it. Establish a guide and best practice on managing remote workers, not only for your managers, but for your employees as well, so that they know what they can expect. And as I say, we've all been thrown into the situation for the last year and a bit, but let's build on a better program for the way forward. Very important, and it's very topical right now, the whole area around IT equipment and cybersecurity. You want to make sure that wherever your staff are working, that your data is safe, that your customer data is safe, your company data is safe. We had one client who, an employee was in Portugal, they didn't even know they were based there, and they lost their laptop.
Oh dear.
So,
okay.
That's not the time you want to start questioning your cyber safety and your encryption.
Wow, no.
So again, responsibilities around GDPR and data, you do have a responsibility to safeguard that, and don't compromise, obviously, your obligations at this time. Good communication practices really important. And we know that relationship with our employees is built on good communications, trust. So communication practices while we're working remotely, really, really important amongst each other. So even if we're on a Zoom call or we're on a Teams call, is there a protocol on kind of making sure everybody gets to have a voice? Is there a protocol around, is it video cameras on or video cameras if you want? So some of those sort of things are really important. I know some clients that have had employees who have not had their camera on the whole time.
Okay.
Now, some of that has been poor internet connection, but some of it has been just uncomfortable with, having their camera on. Now that's getting that person who has not been physically seen on a camera for 6+ months or 12 months, getting them back into the office is going to be difficult.
Yeah.
So there's a real psychological shift that is going to be needed there for everybody. So these are some of the things to think about and anticipate when you start to talk to your employees about what model is going to work for the future and how you're going to bring some of them back.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's lots of health and safety responsibilities as an employer, and the HSA has a really good guide. They maintain it, they keep it up to date. There's a really good ergonomic assessment and remote working office checklist there. So I would recommend everybody to go and check that out. There are also some virtual ergonomic tools. There's a really nice company, an Irish company that has set up a service where they're doing virtual ergonomic assessment of a home office. Because at the moment, you can't send out a health and safety consultant to everybody's home to check, is their home office suitable? One, you don't have permission to enter their house because they're working from home, not by choice, but because it's a government protocol. So ordinarily, if you were developing a remote working proactively, you would say, this is the standard of health and safety regulations. This is what a home office setup should be. Now that we've come through this period, we need to start doing that. So that may be that some employees cannot work remotely because they don't have the environment that's suitable from a health and safety point of view to have a remote office. And this is where the national hubs will become very, very important, that the government is driving through their new initiative. Because maybe employees want remote working, but just won't remote work from their home. They'll remote work from the local library or the local Leo office or some other shared office setup. All right. So these are some of the things for you to factor in. These hubs are opening up. There's going to be a big push over the next 12, 24 months. So again, if you're developing your remote working policy and strategy, you need to bear that in mind. So what you want to do in the next 6 months may well change 12 to 18 months, because your staff, wherever they're located around the country, will have greater access to some of these remote hubs, and it might work better.
And Frederica, you mentioned on an earlier slide just about that ergonomics. Are we currently obliged to ensure that, or because we're in this crisis situation, it's sort of, as you say, it's not really remote working, it's more just temporary situation. Are we required as employers to make that ergonomic assessment?
You're required to make sure that the workplace is fit for purpose. So you do have a responsibility there. So while you can't get a health and safety or an ergonomic specialist out to check, what you could do is use the checklist that the HSA has on their website and get individuals to do a self-assessment of their workstation.
Oh, okay. For self-assessment. That's helpful to know. Okay.
Yeah. So at
and
least
they need to, and probably when they put, or if they put in their request for remote working, that could accompany that.
It could accompany that, certainly at that point, but even now it would be a good idea for you to do that. I mean, we're already seeing claims come through about individuals who have issues with the environment that they've been working in, and the employer is responsible for that. So on one hand, there was a great push for flexibility and shared understanding around the situation that we were in. That is easier to sustain when it's a shorter period of time. 12 months on, there's an expectation, and a reasonable expectation, that we've had enough time to structure this more effectively, to put greater resources to it, and actually to make sure that we are not putting the health and well-being of any of our employees at risk because of the environment that they're in. So what worked this time last year may not be appropriate right now.
And Frederica, we have a question from one of the attendees has asked, couple of questions actually. One is, how far in advance should I start planning return to the office, considering the government guidelines are still saying work from home?
Yeah, so I think you could actually start to gather some input from staff at this stage. All right, there is some talk that we might be allowed return to our workplace maybe August or September. That's obviously if everything continues to go in the right direction.
Yeah.
So that'll come quicker than we realize. And of course, we're coming into the holiday season. And I would recommend that you start develop a questionnaire for your staff to fill in. I think do it anonymously rather than actually get people to sign it, because I think you'll get more honesty that way.
Okay.
We're just finalising a guide with Enterprise Ireland on this whole area, and so we give sample questions in that guide. It'll be published shortly, but I think in the meantime, asking your staff maybe even 10 questions around what has worked, what hasn't worked, what's their preference, what are some of the challenges that they're encountering, what are some of the reasons why they'd like to return, what are some of the reasons why they wouldn't, and what would their preference be? Because you have to start planning for your, whether it's an office or whether it's a plant or whatever, you have to start planning. And I'm sure landlords everywhere are beginning to ask companies to make some commitments as well. You know, so that hopefully will help.
And on that, a gentleman has noted that he has experience of one company that offer virtual workplace assessments for permanent staff, but not for contract staff. And he says he doesn't think that sounds appropriate. So it's certainly a difference in how people are treating their contract virtual versus their permanent staff. Any thoughts around that?
Yeah, look, I think this is a real time for companies to be careful about how they represent themselves, and taking shortcuts is never a good idea when it comes to people. So, you know, there will be certain obligations, but, you know, maybe we could go a little bit more than just by the letter of the law. Maybe we can actually enhance our workplace and our relationship with all of our stakeholders a little bit. So when it comes to a contractor, if it's somebody who is self-employed, is not an employee, then obviously they have responsibility for their own equipment. They have responsibility for their own working hours. You know, they have autonomy over all of those things. You can still make some recommendations to them. You can still encourage them to set up a good workstation, because at the end of the day, you want them to produce something for you. And so if they have a better workplace, the chances are the quality of the work they perform will be better. So again, you know, you may not have a legal obligation to a contractor, but maybe your obligation goes beyond that. And when you take a shortcut, it may not always represent you in the way you'd like.
And that guide that you are producing with Enterprise Ireland, that sounds helpful. That's a guide on what questions we should put into a questionnaire. When would that be available, Frederica?
Well, we're hoping it will be perhaps a June timeframe, and it'll be available on site. It'll be a free guide. People can download it themselves. It covers an awful lot of different areas. And we've put in some sample policies and sample questions for staff questionnaires. But I'd encourage people to start the process now if they could. You could always do another survey in another month or two if that made sense. And again, you know, there's a dynamic to take account of as well. If you had surveyed staff in around February timeframe, when anyone who had childcare responsibilities had was
different context.
Different context, so you would have got a different response. So again, coming into June timeframe, you're going to have people who have family responsibilities, who are coming to the end of the school year, who are feeling the pressures associated with, you know, maybe childcare services not being available or summer camps not being there. So
Yeah.
that might influence their view again. So
Yeah.
it's okay.
And then again in
Yeah.
September may change again. More people will be vaccinated. It'll be different context again. So we really need to keep the temperature,
Exactly.
understand the temperature again.
Yeah.
And
So keeping a
another,
simple questionnaire is good. 10
yeah,
questions is about enough, I would think. And
right.
we do it regularly.
Okay. And then a question, can you refuse a request to work remotely on the grounds that the investment in making a remote location compliant is prohibitive, especially where a company has already invested in their office space?
Yeah. I think we're going to see more of these sort of things come up. So what a lot of these things come down to is reasonable response.
Okay.
So what is reasonable? And of course, what's reasonable for one company may not be reasonable for another company.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So when you refuse something on the grounds of financial burden,
Mm-hmm.
it would be very important for you to be able to substantiate that.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And I absolutely understand that if you've made an investment in a lovely office environment, you've had to make a lot of changes because of the COVID regulations and all of that. And now employees want to work remotely as well. So that means you have to maybe buy an office desk, office chair, and you already have everything that you need in the office for them. And if they're going to be blended, then you're going to have doubling up of some things.
Yeah.
I would think it will be a more difficult, it'd be more difficult for you to prove that if you use finance on its own. And so I would recommend definitely something other than a financial burden to turn down a request. I think if it was something around the job itself, the output of the job, or the requirements of the customer, that might well be more substantiated. Yeah.
And Frederica, big question has become a big topic. And this question is from Joaquin, and he asks, like you said before, employees may want to travel and move around to other countries and work remotely from other countries. I hear the Canaries has about 15,000 people working remotely there, decided to go there during the pandemic. What would be the best way to manage this? What guidelines should we be adhering to? It can get quite complicated, can't it?
It really can. It really can. And we're going to hear more and more about this, of course.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you would have observed that some of the larger firms have called back all their staff from every location back to Dublin or back to Ireland.
Yeah.
The issue about people working outside of this tax jurisdiction is that if they're working outside for a period of time, there could be a liability for them and for the company.
Yeah.
So I think in the early days, there was great flexibility extended because some people needed to return home to family. And I think there will be a reasonableness in accommodating the decisions that were taken for those reasons. However, again, the expectation is that we now have learned from all of that. We're coming through a process. We've time to put structure around it. I think it's going to be something that you definitely will need to put into your policy. And even in relation to traveling for vacation, traveling for work, I think there's going to be a need for you to have a policy around that as well. And, just making sure that staff know that they need to notify somebody if they're traveling to certain countries. And again, a lot of that is going to come from the government. They're saying that they're going to release some guidelines for us on travel.
Okay.
But the whole area about quarantining and self-isolation, of course, it's going to be there for some time, even though the vaccination program is making great progress. We're still not going to be free from some of the challenges that are in certain locations around the world.
Okay.
So
getting more complicated, but good to have guidance there from Enterprise Ireland, from the government over the next few months then.
I think so. So. And it is good. It's a good time to start thinking about it. I mean, we're seeing it just in the last few weeks ourselves, a real increase in the number of questions coming in. Companies now are beginning to realize that it's coming close to people returning to the workplace, and so they need to get ready. So I think last year we had a really nice protocol from the government that gave us all of the expectations of what the workplace would be like.
Yeah.
It's a different situation now this time around. And so even though some companies would have made maybe significant investment in changes to accommodate the 2-meter distance, that 2-meter distance may not be as essential this time around. So again, I wouldn't make any changes immediately to your workplace. If you have made those investments, leave them until such time as you can start to withdraw, because we could be in a situation again in another few months where there is a different variant, or we have to pull back the amount of people in one location. And so just if you've made the investment, I'd hold on to that for another while, really. Okay.
Okay, sure.
So just coming back then to some of the other areas, there's been an awful lot of talk about mental health and well-being, and really that cannot be underestimated. It is an area of responsibility. It fits within health and safety legislation. So it is an expectation that you will provide the necessary supports for your employees to take care of them and ensure that their workplace does not adversely impact their health and welfare in any way. And then just in relation to your decision making, please pay attention to all of the good principles that you would have paid attention to before. A diverse workplace is a better workplace on every level. So this is not the time to pull back and just not give diversity and inclusion as much attention as it should get. So when you're building your remote working strategy, so much is going to be determined by your culture. And even some of those questions that people were asking earlier around, should I pay for a contractor or ergonomic assessment or not? This is where culture comes into focus, all right? And your culture will define a lot about you as an employer, as about a place to work, and will define the level of engagement you get from your staff as well. So again, please pay attention to the importance of culture. I know culture can be one of those terms that kind of is used widely, but it does define so much about what it is like to work in your environment and how you represent yourself. So, you know, when it comes to engagement and the relationship with your employees, mix up the communication that you're having with your staff in a virtual way, or even when it gets to face. Smaller teams can maybe be more effective, and more one-to-ones can be good. And having calls that are just not work related. You know, if you've got 5 or 6 people on your team, having a call just to check in on them, to say hi, what are your plans for the weekend, you know, that's 5 calls in a month. And it would probably make a lot of difference to the employee if they received a call like that. So it's not that you're checking up on them, you're checking in with them. And I think it would be a really nice thing to do. And remember just the difficulty for any of the employees who've been hired during COVID. And the interesting thing, there has been a lot of recruitment going on during COVID. So people have been moving. And the one thing I'd say about that is if somebody's not happy with the environment that they're in, they have no difficulty moving again. So there is a lot of opportunity out there. There's a lot of movement. Getting a good virtual selection process is important, but equally getting a good virtual onboarding process and building some structure around that. We definitely would recommend a buddy system, and we would recommend that you put a lot of planning and make more effort around the communication, because somebody needs to feel connected to you. And even doing a virtual tour of your workplace and sharing it, because some people can't remember what it was like. And so when they do come back to it, it'll look probably very different because there might be some changes. So even doing some of those sort of smart little video tips can really be engaging and can make a big difference. So look out for your vulnerable people. pay attention, obviously, to what staff are doing. Are they performing to the standard that they expect and that you expect? And if somebody is withdrawing a little bit, reach out and make sure they're okay, because you don't know what any personal circumstances might be happening in the background.
Frederica, there's a question actually from somebody who it's a really good point. They say, I have experience of friends who've had to take mental health breaks from work, so they take a week or so off. Of course, this is not something that I want to see happen to any of my staff. So how do I manage staff well-being as well as my own? Because really, I am in the same boat. So as leaders, we're really tasked with keeping ourselves mentally
agile,
and we really have to mind that in the first instance before we can mind the vulnerable employees or anybody else. So really advice for us all. I mean, when you say how mind your vulnerable employees, what does that look like, or what best practice have you seen there in managing mental health?
Well-being. We might even do another talk on this.
That would be a great idea.
So,
I mean,
it's huge.
It is huge, and I did hear, for a few months I was sick of hearing go for a walk and take exercise, because it's a bit more than that, isn't it? There's a bit more to be done there.
Absolutely. And it's even that, as I was saying earlier, about our mental fitness has just shifted hugely.
It's been tested. But anyway, as leaders, we always need to keep our mental fitness really high, don't we? In any case.
I know. And I actually think it has been really tough on leaders, because leaders have been facing all of the challenges from the business as well, and looking out for themselves, looking out for their families, their loved ones, and looking out for their staff. So who's going to look out for the leaders? So
it might be worth doing a separate one, Frederica.
I think we might, because it is so important. And I would say, the EAP programs are wonderful, but think about intervention before the problem arises. So while EAP programs are very often introduced as
employee assistance programs.
Employee assistance programs, exactly. So there are some wonderful companies who provide employee assistance programs where you have one-to-one support in counselling or in therapy of some sort, and you can pay for a program, or you pay per service. Not every business, of course, can fund that. And also, I would say sometimes it's introduced after an incident or after something has happened. And I would recommend you think about all of the non-finance based interventions that maybe you could put in place before situations arise. And so much of it's down to communications. If we feel that we have somebody to talk to, if we feel that we're included, if we feel that on days that I don't feel so great, I can step back from my desk. On days where I'm overwhelmed by some of my other responsibilities, that I can actually say to my boss, you know what, today's not a great day. Do you mind if I just take some time off or catch up another day? You'll get the return on your investment if you care for your people. You'll get the loyalty, you'll grow trust, and you will get the engagement and motivation that is priceless.
It is. And Frederica, another question. What about hiring remotely from another country? How can we manage teams so diverse in culture? So that's another big question, isn't it? Managing diversity in our teams. Might be worth another webinar.
It might.
What any tips in regards?
Again, I would say that's not unique to this situation.
No.
Right. I think diversity and hiring diverse teams, people working in various locations, I think has been something for so many businesses. And it's not only technology, it can happen in lots of different sectors as well. I think it's great. I think you do need to think about how do you integrate them into the team. So
there's also diversity within Ireland. I think they might be based here, but there'll be diverse cultures.
Yeah. And you can host culture evenings. So and culture evenings where the person from whatever culture shares some details, shares some photographs, does a small little video clip. There's all sorts of different ways. Again,
it's a great idea. Yeah.
You could get a team together within the organization that actually supports some of these programs, throws out some ideas, invites people. I mean, if you're invited to participate in something, it makes you feel really good, no matter what it is. It's nice. You feel somebody knows you're there and they're interested in what you have to say and share. So, reach out, be engaging, be inclusive, and celebrate our differences. Even celebrating, my goodness, the amount of dogs that have been
introduce your dogs to.
You could have a dog photo.
That's a great idea.
Who doesn't love dogs?
Yeah.
So that could be so funny, and there's all sorts of lighthearted and uplifting activities that you could, and simple sometimes is the best, so don't over engineer some of the engagement points with staff, I would say. Okay.
And another question. Yeah, I mean, the benefit of having a live audience, Frederica, is we can access your expertise in real time, so I won't stop the questions.
Please don't. Yeah.
Where companies and managers are not supportive of working from home in general, is there something that can be done to help them think differently, to fully review and understand the benefits or challenges, rather than just, I want everyone in the office, so we can attract, support and retain staff in the future? So that's really about kind of leadership style, isn't it?
It is.
Maybe. Yeah.
And that speaks volumes about culture as well. All right. So culture is going to be really under pressure, culture and values. So, the days when we spent lots of money getting beautiful graphics done about the type of environment we are, our mission statement and what it's like to work here, and our values, they're going to be tested. And the leadership team are going to have to lead out on this. So it is a time to step forward. I agree with the person who raised that question. There are still a lot of very conservative traditionalists who are at the senior positions in organizations. And when they had to shift to remote, they shifted, but they didn't believe in it.
Okay.
Right. So I think there is some support that they need to actually understand the priorities of the business. So this is not just about the priorities of the staff, because staff are important as a priority of the business. So reevaluate the priorities of the business. So do you want the best people on your team? And if the best people on your team are saying to you, I love the work I do, I want to stay in this company, but I want you to let me work in a way that I can really produce wonderful work, wonderful output. So have some of those, meaningful conversations. And again, maybe it's an opportunity to survey your staff on some of these core principles.
I think that lady was asking also, like, how we might convince a leader who doesn't want to be that, or isn't that open to working from home. Perhaps it's to provide stats, etc. From how, I mean, really companies have, I think it seems like they've been taken aback by how, in some ways, there hasn't been a great amount of disruption to the performance of their staff while working from home.
Yeah, all of the stats are saying that productivity is up. So
maybe that's a way.
Speaks volumes. I think data points are always very valuable to support a conversation around this. But the other thing you could do, depending on what that business is or that sector is, you could actually look at some other competitors maybe and look at what they're doing. So sometimes it's important.
That's a good idea. Yeah.
Put the mirror up and actually say, well, hang on a second, if you want to get left behind, and if you want,
you could lose staff to that competitor.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, good.
So I think it's identifying, again, business critical dimensions, and actually being able to have good conversations around them. So I think it's always best not to isolate a leader, be inclusive, and share information, even request trying something on a trial basis, brings them into a safe place. And I think sometimes that can be more powerful.
Sure.
Yeah. So here's just some details on if you were setting up a buddy system. I would definitely recommend it, certainly for new joiners, establish buddy, but train your buddies. So, it's all very well you approaching somebody in your organization and saying, look, would you be a buddy to Jack? He's starting next week. And you're saying, I'd love to be. Fabulous. And you have a call with Jack the first day he joins. You say, look, I'm going to be your buddy, so you come to me now anytime you have any questions, or I'm here to help you, and I know a lot about the company. I've been here for ages, so don't hesitate to call me. And off they go. Jack isn't going to call just because you said call me. Jack needs you to be proactive as the buddy. So set up a buddy program, support the buddies to be good at what it is you're asking them to do. Check in to make sure it's delivering the outcome that you want. And if it's not, change it. But we have seen it being really, really effective. So I would recommend that for onboarding, but also for the remote working model as well. Just have somebody to go to other than your manager. There might be things that you could share with a trusted buddy that you might not be comfortable sharing with your manager. Okay.
Sure.
The other thing that, of course, is the big nugget always, and not only in remote working, but of course it's very important in remote working as well, is performance management. And I think this is an area that's difficult anyway. And if I was to ask all of the managers that we work with on a scale of 1 to 10, how much do they love doing performance management, I know what they would tell me. So, but yet we know that in whatever shape performance management is in your organization, the purpose of it is to align what individuals are doing with what the business needs are. Okay. So again, simplify it. Don't over-engineer this, but take account of the fact that the work environment and the workplace has shifted throughout this time. So that means you need to just make some adjustments in how you perform, how you manage your performance management, how you engage with staff. And there are 3 key areas of performance management. The first one is goal setting. So if you're not setting goals with people, they don't have to be for a year. Set them for a quarter. Bite-sized chunks is always easier for all of us to cope with. So bite-sized chunks, set goals, check in regularly to see how people are getting on. So have coaching conversations with people throughout that quarter. Are they getting stuck somewhere? Is there a challenging relationship that they need support overcoming or whatever? Is the goal relevant? Has something else happened in the meantime that maybe you need to redesign that goal? And then giving feedback. I think as a nation, we are often uncomfortable giving feedback, meaningful feedback. And so we try and we avoid it. And of course, avoiding it is not successful for you or for the employee. So it is, I think, a skill that we need to develop, and it is something we need to get into a better rhythm of. So giving meaningful feedback in a time relevant is important. So don't wait for 3 months to tell me that I messed up on something, or don't wait for my 6-monthly review to tell me that you got one of the managers said that I didn't perform terribly well at a meeting, or that my contribution on that project wasn't what they expected. You've just missed an opportunity. So performance management is really important during this time. A lot of companies actually have put it on hold, and I think it is not a good idea. And mainly because I think of the workload that managers have in dealing with this virtual remote working situation. But if you have good performance management conversations, it is an opportunity for you to communicate. It is an opportunity for you to check in. It builds the relationship. And so that's a better investment in the long run.
Yeah.
Okay. So continue on with your performance management. And of course, communications, you can never do enough of that. And this sometimes we get confused with what you've said or you think you've communicated, and we don't check back to see, was that the message that landed? So communications is one of those very
big word.
Yeah, but so important. So important. And so of course there's lots of different ways in how we communicate. We're missing that physical touch point of communication, and it's harder to read somebody on the screen. And again, if somebody's not putting on their video, it even makes it more difficult.
Of course, yeah.
So,
so you have an interesting graph here.
Yeah, so look, I think pay attention to all the different things that you need to pay attention to, and over communicate if you can. It'll never hurt.
Okay.
The importance of feedback, I've touched on that. And just, while you're planning for your remote working strategy, getting feedback from all of the stakeholders is important.
Okay.
So, and I would include your contractors in that. If they are providing valuable services to you, even your suppliers, again, if they're critical to your business, your partners, whoever those stakeholders are, I would reach out to them. I would include them, because what you're trying to do is make sure you de-risk your business, actually put good structures for the future. So I'm just mindful of time.
Yeah, we're coming to the end of our time now.
So just in relation to the next few slides are just giving you a quick, I suppose, list of things that I believe are coming up that need to be taking account of.
Yeah.
And that fear of what I'm missing out on at the end there, that's bigger than we realize. So again, making sure that you're inclusive of everybody, the introvert and the extrovert. All right. Yeah. Really, really important at this time. These are just a few slides on just in relation to what's coming up from a government point of view over the next few quarters. So again, just to kind of, I suppose, as a point of reference that you can look at. There's a guide here, on a home working guide from our professional institute that I've included that I think will be helpful for businesses. And then just things for you to consider in developing your toolkit. Again, a point of reference for you. We've covered all the things that I've talked about here. Yeah. And key takeaways. So, as I said, I really believe culture and values are coming under the spotlight. It's a real time for leadership to shine. Bring your people with you, show direction, be inclusive, and take on board input and feedback.
Okay, Frederica, that's tons of good tips there. So certainly lots and lots of food for thought. And almost, I kind of feel that there's another couple of webinars in the making that we may ask you to come back for, and lots to look out for then even the next few months, isn't there?
There is. This space of the future of work is evolving. Don't try and get it perfect first time round. I think start to ask your staff and your stakeholders for input, start to develop some of the principles, be true to your company, be true to your values, and learn from all the experiences, and be prepared, I suppose, to flex and to adjust over the coming weeks and months.
Thank you so much for joining us today, Frederica, and for everybody on the call. Anybody receiving this, anybody who's registered will also get the recording. So we'll send out your presentation as an attachment as well, because there's a lot of really good stuff in the presentation to help formulate our strategy. And it sounds like there might be some more documentation coming out. You might think of us when it pops into your inbox. Yeah, and we'll share it with with our clients also. And yeah, so thank you very much. And thanks to everybody. Next week, we'll be talking next Friday morning to local enterprise office. And so anybody interested in grants for their business will be speaking with Dublin Leo. So that's always a very popular webinar. Thank you so much, Frederica. Thank you to everybody for joining us. And we'll speak to you again soon, Frederica.
Thank you very much.
Thanks coming from the, lots of thanks coming from the participants.
Thank you very much, everybody. Okay. Great to speak to you this morning. Bye, Rose.
Bye now.
Bye-bye.